like a massive star. When the gravity starts to become too much for that star and is putting on more structure than it can actually handle, it collapses, And I think that we can all relate to that in our life, where we feel this like urge to just collapse and burn it all to the ground and just quit. But a massive star, when all that gravity happens, it collapses. It doesn't resist the collapse. And this is what I always say, the reason that we suffer isn't because of the pressure. It's not because of the collapse. It's resisting that collapse.
Welcome back to Between Fires and Futures. I'm your host, Tonya Terrell, and today I'm sitting down with someone who understands the real pressure inside tech leadership. Today's guest is someone whose work cuts straight to what tech leaders actually need. Dave Zaron runs Sovereign Leadership, where he helps CIOs, CTOs, and senior technical leaders upgrade how they lead under pressure. Not just with better tactics, but with a stronger internal operating system. The idea at Sovereign Leadership is simple. Technical mastery got these leaders into their roles, but the game has evolved. Now expectations are irrational. Timelines are collapsing. Logic alone no longer holds the line. Your internal system has to be able to handle the chaos, or you burn out trying. That's what we're talking about today, the real human side of leadership under rapid change, the stuff most leaders just don't get support for. We'll talk about pressure, clarity, noise, identity, and how someone in those shoes can reclaim authority in the room. So let's get to it. Dave, thanks for being here.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me, Tonya.
I've told you before, I think IT leaders are one of the most underserved leadership categories, and I love that you've launched something that really supports them. So I want to talk about pressure. Let's start with the pressure. IT leaders, we're talking to them day in and day out. They're carrying this invisible weight. CIOs, CTOs, all IT leaders really are in a tough spot. They're feeling squeezed. Executives want results yesterday. And teams are also just dealing with technical reality. There's just so much pressure that doesn't get talked about enough. So from your vantage point, what pressure is hitting IT leaders the hardest in this AI-heavy, hype-driven moment?
So for me, it always was for me, the burden of competence. So, computers, go do the AI thing is kind of the assumption. So because we have the competence to understand the landscape, everybody abdicates the expectations to the people with the most knowledge in the room. And that can be a lot of weight. But just because I can build a house doesn't mean I can build a rocket ship. So obviously they both use tools, but they're very different disciplines. So I think of companies and organizations like open systems. They're always receiving inputs. They're reacting to trends or market shifts and new technologies that are emerging. So the IT leadership in the organization, their role is really to close a system. It's to define governance. It's to organize and secure your data, and set up boundaries so you can actually build something real. So it's kind of like a jar of muddy water. If you screw on the lid and let it sit, that water doesn't just clear instantly. It takes time for that sediment to settle. Yeah. And when your company and leadership team wants results now, after they've just spent the last decade shaking the jar, it's a very stressful place to put an IT leader. So you can't build a 3-story house on a 1-story foundation. You have to address that foundation first, and that is the part that is the communication layer, to translate that information to not sound like an excuse is a very difficult thing in the climate of today, because there's so much noise in the market saying that everything is so easy and everything is so instant. But that is if the context is understood as to how that organization I would say is organized and has their infrastructure currently. And if that is outside of the context, then it becomes more difficult.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just curious, where are you seeing that kind of pressure actually show up in the behavior of leaders or in their decision making? Like, how is it affecting them?
Well, I would say that for me personally, and for other leaders that I have dealt with in various organizations, it's probably abdication is probably the most evident thing that I see. And I bring this up a lot because a lot of the time everyone talks about delegating, and it's
Mhm.
a very common conversation is, oh, you just need to delegate more. You need to have A
Right.
players. But that's we don't live in a vacuum. We live in reality where objectively you can see that not every situation is the same. So you don't always have those people. And for a leader to get that much weight on them, they want to get that weight off of them. So the very first thing you're going to do is try to delegate, but delegation without any kind of accountability is really abdication. So I find that most people are really abdicating when they think they're delegating, and I have some examples of that. I have some examples of that in some of my stories that I think we're going to get to a little bit
Yeah.
later. But that is probably the most prominent thing is trying just to get rid of the tension, and it's just I call it stacking. Like when one little thing happens and you abdicate it, then the next little thing happens, the next little thing happens, then they just stack and they become a much bigger thing that has multiple layers that all need to be addressed independently. So, and as that continues to stack, the pressure just continues to build and build.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I want to ground this in like some real numbers too, because I was doing a little bit of research in prep for this and came across a stat that was, I mean, I know it because we're talking to IT leaders day in and day out. So it shouldn't shock me, but it's such a large number. It did. So
Mm,
Gartner is saying 70% of
yep.
CIOs report unsustainable stress levels right now,
Mhm.
which is, I mean, that's high. When you think about uh, what is going on across business and this era of AI, and what these IT leaders are under in terms of pressure and expectations, unrealistic expectations, a lot of times. 70% of them are reporting unsustained stress levels right now. So it's not just a technical pressure, it's a human pressure. And like you said, it accumulates, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm speaking more to the mechanism than to the direct result of what they is happening. I mean, obviously, you're taking your work home with you. You just can't shut off. I mean, those are
Yeah.
very common effects to the person. The feeling of inadequacy because you feel like you can't rise to the level that you need to, even though that's not necessarily accurate. It's just what you feel the evidence is showing you, but
Right.
it's just that the evidence isn't contextually correct. It's
Yeah.
it's more ambiguous, the perspective when that happens, and part of the work that I do is more about grounding,
Yeah.
because finding the more practical reality, or what I would call objective reality versus subjective reality, in as what's actually happening around you versus the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah. 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 I'm going to get into that in a minute. But I do want to touch on something. So you said IT leaders, you've described them as sitting between executives who want outcomes fast, right? Like there's this enormous pressure, and teams who see the technical reality. So how
Sure.
is that tension showing up inside organizations?
Sure, sure. Um, so I have this term I use called single lane reality. And ultimately, it's if you're driving a smart car down a single lane highway and you realize you're going the wrong direction, you just stop, make a 3-point turn, and go the other direction. Now, if you're driving an 18 wheeler down the same highway, it's a different situation. And most organizations are 18 wheelers. They're dealing with
Yeah.
compliance and technical debt and customers who expect uptime. You can't just pivot and stop what you're doing. And it's also difficult to add new things onto that structure without improving the foundation of that structure. So I had a DevOps employee for a long time, and he would always use this analogy, and I always felt like it was very true. It is a lot like building a house. So if you agree to a build and they start building the house, all the framing's up, the plumbing is glued, and it's nearly finished, and somebody walks up and says, "Oh, it would be great. what if we move the bathroom to the other side of the house? Now, the concept seems like, okay, bathroom on the other side, but reality is that you have to tear down most of the infrastructure that's been built, the framing, the plumbing, and then you have to rebuild. So the time and ability to actually execute is limited by the physics of the actual structure.
Yeah.
So when it comes to technology, we always end up in a similar spot. You know, when a client has a need that they come up to you and say, oh, this should be a simple fix. Or when a superior comes to you with the same need and they think that these things should be simple to implement. They're really not, because there's a whole layer of foundation that's been laid, and then a whole layer of framing and plumbing and everything else that's been run that also needs to be addressed first before it can be effectively implemented. So for me, you can't really control the chaos of the environment. It's never going to happen. And if you continue to try to control the chaos of the environment, you're going to burn yourself out trying to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, I always go to one of the mantras that I learned, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And for how that applies is slow is to actually trying to reduce the inputs, trying to ground the objective reality of where you currently are. And the smooth is actually trying to lower the entropy. It's trying to organize some of the systems, lock things down a little bit so that you can actually have a place where smooth you can actually execute from with precision. So now, obviously, that sounds theoretical,
Right.
and in theory, it is great. But we're under real pressure between boards and superiors that expect results. So the most effective thing that is going to help you continue to be effective in your position is not your expertise. It's your grounded calm. It's your ability to stay calm and clear under the pressure that is occurring. And that's why I got into this work, because it is something that everybody really needs to. There is no magic pill to grounded calm. It takes structure, it takes systems, it takes frameworks, it takes thought process, and it also takes you understanding who you are and what you're made of.
Yeah. Yeah. So walk us through what that looks like, because you're right that, the tension isn't theoretical, right? It's hitting their nervous system. It's hitting their confidence. I had a day like that yesterday where it was just one thing after another, chaos. And I didn't do the grounding. So I just had a meltdown in the evening. So
Sure.
I'm living this reality. So, walk us through what that grounding looks like.
Sure. So I would say that to kind of even begin with that, you have to understand what you're made of. And a lot of leadership training these days works on mindset. And that's a pretty sole focus of most of them. But mindset, while it is important, is only, I usually say, 1/5 of the actual system of what you are. So I call it in my work the system of being. And that system is made up of 5 distinct layers, which is first is your body. And we'll say, to make it relative, that's your hardware. For your mind, obviously. So that is your back end. It retrieves data, it processes logic, it stores data. Your front end would be your ego. That is how you represent on a daily basis and to the world. And then you have your spirit, which is like your network. It's your connection layer. It connects you to meaning, purpose, and a higher power if you have one, or something greater than yourself. And then there's the self, and that is the deepest layer, which I would consider your kernel. It's your core operating unit and your router. So if you a lot of people believe that ego plays this large role in our lives, and it's this evil thing that needs to be defeated because, I have to stop my ego. But it's not what the ego actually is. The ego is just a translation layer, and it's how you show up. So it's really just an amplification of what the system already is. Mm-hmm. So to fix that, you need to fix the system, and you have to understand the layers to address any of those things. So for an example, I would say I'm a father. And when I'm playing with my 4-year-old daughter, or I'm spending time with her, I'm playful, I'm compassionate, I'm very patient. And I also have two 20-year-old daughters. So with them, I'm still a father, but I'm a little less playful because I'm holding them accountable. And I have to be a little more practical with them because they're in a different phase of their life.
Right. You
But
show up
then when
differently.
yeah, exactly. So then when I'm with a vendor, say, and I'm trying to hold them accountable or negotiate, I'm going to be logical. I'm going to be practical. I'm going to be stern, because that's appropriate for the context. So
Right.
now, say I was dealing with a vendor and I was playful and compassionate and a little too patient, most likely I'm going to get taken advantage of. And if I am spending time with my daughter and I'm stern and I'm logical and I'm very set in my ways with what I expect, she's probably going to get frightened or not want to spend time with me.
Right.
So the misalignments in the system, it's not in the individual because it doesn't represent who you are. It just represents how you're showing up in that moment.
Right.
So to understand that there are these multiple layers that are affecting how you're showing up helps you to diagnose and to do what I like to do is get the data, look at the
Yeah.
log, get the data, and figure out, okay, so where is this happening? So just say, for example, you wake up with back pain one morning, right? So now your hardware is malfunctioning, right? Or it's compromised. So now that's going to create latency in your logical processing in your mind layer. So now all of a sudden the ego layer might show up and you might snap at an employee or something because you're already out of alignment with your system.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, understanding that, okay, well, it wasn't that I'm just this bad leader or I'm a bad boss. The reality of the situation is that something in your system is not functioning properly. And if you don't give that the time and attention that it deserves, then it's going to throw off the alignment and then it's going to put you directly in the ego layer, which is going to cause you to be reactive. And you're just going to, that front end is basically just going to show whatever it feels like it can show based on the alignment that's there. So it's going to become reactive based on environment and circumstance rather than grounded in the reality of the context of what's there.
Yeah.
So when you're in alignment and that self, that kernel is operating, it allows for the patients to be to let the context of the environment drive the response that you give to any given moment. So now you come out of that reactive layer and you go into the responsive layer. So it really doesn't matter what's going on. Everything inside of you is going from your baseline kernel. So the routing is true and it's clean, and you're representing yourself in the most appropriate way for the context of the actual situation. So it's really misalignment that's disrupting your system, not a personality flaw or the fact that you don't know how to lead. We all know how to do these things. Information is not a problem. Integration of how we use it is where is where we need to learn how
Yeah.
to
That's the gap.
improve. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the gap. Yeah,
Yeah. I love this. I love these analogies because it makes that internal operating system so much easier to understand. So yes, there's so much talk about mindset, right? And we've all done the mindset work.
sure.
I've done the mindset work and I still had a meltdown, right?
Yeah,
Um, I came into the new year with my mindset totally in alignment with what I wanted
Mm.
to create this year, and I still had a meltdown last night. So there's neuroscience showing that under pressure, most leaders make their decisions from that reactive nervous system state, and we can't make the best decisions from that state. So even brilliant leaders get shaky if their internal system's off. I love the analogies that you've made because IT leaders are already systems thinkers, right? They understand architecture, they understand dependencies, but
sure.
I've never heard anyone relate that to like themselves as a
Mm.
human, themselves as a leader. And I think IT leaders who already are good, systems thinkers, they rarely apply that lens to themselves.
That's
So
fair.
I
Yeah.
love how you have framed this. And if mindset is only 1/5 of who we are, what else do IT leaders need to understand about their own inner operating system?
Sure, that's a fair question. I think for me, the way that this has been, or how this developed for me,
Yeah.
and we'll get more to some of the stories on that later, but so when it comes to the ego, and I'll just try and talk about each layer a little bit separately, briefly. When it comes to the ego, I think that's the biggest misconception piece of the system, is that everyone's like, oh, well, you're just egotistical, right? And then
Mhm.
automatically they're like, oh, they're full of themselves. Well, we're all full of ourselves to a certain degree, right? You know, like whether your primary operating system is service to others or service to self, right? So, because that's typically kind of how you can group a lot of these things,
Yeah.
service to others, service to self. And if you're service to others, you really only need to be service to others about 54% of the time to be very successful in your life, which means that the other 46%, you're service to yourself. So we're always in service to ourselves to some degree.
Right.
And the same thing with service to self individuals. They're probably more like 95 service to self, but there's still 5% that they're service to others.
Mhm.
So, and really, that's kind of an archetypal view of how some people operate, and everybody falls within some guardrail
Yeah, it's a
of one of
spectrum,
those
right?
two. Yeah, in those spectrums. So, and the thing is that there's no judgment. You know, if you're STO and your service to others versus if you're STS, service to self, own it. Like, just know that you're there and own it. Because that's ultimately the way that you're going to serve the world and everyone else is to be true to yourself and who you are, because that's when you're going to put the best work out all the time. So it doesn't really matter. There's no judgment of, oh, they're a selfish individual, right? You have to understand the mechanics behind it, because there's no emotion when there's actually understanding. And emotion is really just an indicator, like a notification in the system anyway. It's telling you when something's off, you know? Like, you're not an angry person, you just feel anger.
Right.
It's how it is, right? So it's like, okay, so that anger is an indication that something's out of alignment. Because if you're
Right.
feeling that on a regular basis, then obviously something's not right. So understanding that ego layer, it's not who I am. It's just how I'm representing in this moment. It's not my identity. I don't really have an identity, because identity is more of a vector than it is an actual static thing. So, and it's contextual. It always is, because roles are obviously very contextual, like father is a role, but being playful is not a role. That's a character trait. And it doesn't belong to my identity, or I don't have this singular identity, because I can be playful, but I can also be serious. So how can that be part of my identity if I can be both? It's a usable tool that I can shift around based on the context of the environment. But if the environment's so loud and it's telling me how to be, then I'm going to just be what the environment and circumstance tell me, rather than understanding who I am and remaining in that core layer. And
Yeah.
that's the layer of the self. And it's not really spiritual. I mean, there is a spiritual layer to this, obviously, but it's a very practical thought process when you think about this operating unit, that it's a core that you have to be in alignment with, because it's like a basketball game, right? If you In the game of basketball, the objective is quite simple. It's to throw a 9.5-inch diameter ball into an 18-inch or so hoop that's 10 feet off the ground, right?
Mhm.
So the concept seems very simple, but in a game with professional athletes playing it, they're only going to hit about 50% of their shots, and that's a good game, because they're taking about 90, or they're going to make about 90, 100 and something points. So now imagine in that same game, the most elite athletes, but that goal keeps shifting a foot to the left, a foot to the right, up, down, all the time. So now they're going to put in the same amount of effort to run up and down the court and play their game,
But
but
less success.
exactly, less
Yeah.
success. So
And that is
uh,
life.
exactly, and there's the story of life.
Yeah.
So you can't control those things, but you can control how if you shoot the ball, miss it because the goal shifted in the middle of it. Are you going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm the victim now? I'm the victim to the chance of the fact that this happened, or are you going to say, okay, recalculation next time?
Yeah.
And that's what the self allows you to do with that alignment. It allows you to stay in that zone. But that alignment has to stay true, which depends on every other part of the system. The network needs to be well connected. The ego needs to be understood for what it is, so you're not lost in it and reactive to everything going on. The mind needs to be mindset work is going to improve your ability to communicate within the system. That is 100% true. It's just not the whole system in itself. So the mind sets the stage. It allows you to see what's going on. It actually builds the actual stage, but it doesn't necessarily tell you, it doesn't tell you the story of what's going on. It's just building it. The ego is
Right.
what's telling you the story. And then your body, obviously, if you're not taking care of your body to some degree, and I'm not talking about spending 4 hours in the gym, but personally, I'm a very busy individual, but I track my macros pretty religiously. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to do this, but it is something that I do because it's how I respect my body.
Yeah.
I am aware of the calories I take in. I'm aware of what it started off just with macros, but now I'm very intense. I look at my sodium, my fiber, everything. But that's an evolution over time. It's taken 2 years to really get good at that. But that's a way that I take care of my body so that I continue to have it in alignment with the rest of the system. Because there's a very popular quote where it's, what is it? To get managed, it needs to be measured. So whatever's
Yes.
measured get managed. Same thing with your body, with every single layer. If you're not measuring what's going on, then you're not managing them.
That makes complete sense. So I really want to kind of ground this in the rest of the discussion in like the reality of where we are seeing and hearing IT leaders are today, right? And I was looking at
Sure.
the research the other day. It said more than half of CIOs feel that the job that they have today is not the job that they were actually hired for, which makes sense. I mean, the landscape is shifting under their feet. AI is changing everything faster than human, like anybody's mind can keep up with.
Mm.
Um, and I think we talked about this earlier that a lot of times these CIOs, CTOs, they were hired as technical stewards, maybe operators. Now the
Mm.
business wants them to be transformation leaders, and AI adds a whole new layer of complexity and expectation. Um,
Sure.
and the data was showing 75% say that they're being pushed into that role without matching resources. So,
Mm.
they're being pushed into this visionary
Sure.
transformation role. That's not what they were hired for. They don't have the resources. So that gap alone, of course, is overwhelming.
Mm. Sure.
So if most IT leaders were hired as technical stewards, not visionaries, what actually happens when the business suddenly expects them to lead big transformation in this AI era? Because that's what's being asked of them right now. And,
Sure.
I really want to talk about like this. I feel so passionate about this. AI is moving so fast. Now is the time to ground into, the leadership, the qualities that like the human centered piece of it. Um, So, yeah, what happens when the business suddenly expects these
Yep.
leaders to lead big and they don't have the resources, maybe they don't have the budget, that's not what they were hired to
Sure.
do. Like what's the identity shift that they have to make to lead at that level?
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'd say I wouldn't say it's a full on identity shift, but it is the ability to shift identity, sure,
Yeah.
but there's not a specific identity that's going to work in every context. But I would say that obviously the position is evolving. I mean, that's very evident. But evolution takes time,
Yeah.
as we have seen.
Yeah.
So, and technology's always moved quickly, at least in the past 25 years, since the turn of the century, it's moved very quickly. But if it was moving at the sound of speed before, it's definitely moving at the speed of light now. And same with the expectations around it. So, I like to kind of ground this, I guess, in physics, really, because I'm going to talk about. I think where the best place to go here is because ultimately there's not one answer, right? There's not like, oh,
Yeah.
well, you need to be more stern with with your team, or you need to be this or that. It's always contextual, and you have to trust yourself, obviously, enough to make that judgment. So I'm going to go over, I guess, what I think is the best method to do that. So in physics, or really in space, a star, like a massive star, when the gravity starts to become too much for that star and is putting on more structure than it can actually handle, it collapses. And I think that we can all relate to that in our life, where we feel this like urge to just collapse and burn it all to the ground and just quit, because it just feels like the weight that we're carrying is so much. So, but a massive star, when all that gravity happens, it collapses. It doesn't resist the collapse. And this is what I always say: the reason that we suffer isn't because of the pressure. It's not because of the collapse. It's resisting that collapse.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not letting it happen. It's saying, I've got to be strong. I got to hold on. I got to this. I got to that. This is what's expected. That's living in the ego layer, the reactive. What are people going to think? What is this? What's that? So the collapse is very important. You have to learn to collapse. And what does it do? It collapses, then it explodes. That's the dying star I'm still talking about. It explodes, and then it expands. It expands into new life, into the raw materials that make up planets, other stars, and life in itself. So what does this really mean for people? It's actually a process that I like to call, I call it Contra Chi. That's kind of the name I've given it, which contra means opposition, and Chi is short for Kairos, for most opportune moment. So it's really opposition at the most opportune moment. And the most opportune moment is always in that collapse. When you're feeling the weight of what's going on and you're feeling that collapse, I have a very distinct framework that I use for this. And the very first step is to stop. Stop apologizing, stop twisting the narrative, stop outsourcing the reason for those things happening to something else. And then the next step is to sort. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to see and orient yourself. Like, what's mine to carry in this scenario? With what's happening right now, or the request that's been given, what's mine to carry? What can wait? What's important? What can I deal with right now, and what can wait? And then everything else you let go, right? That's the explosion. It's just gone. It doesn't matter, because none of the stuff matters if it's not something that you need to own. So understanding what you need to own is very important. And then that's the explosion. After you sort, you explode, which is what I call taking your stand. And that's when you make your decision. In stand, it means scope, terms, alignment, negligibles, and decide. So you have to understand what the scope is, what the terms you're willing to agree to, and the terms of which you can execute it. You need to understand if it's in alignment with who you are, how you feel, and what you're capable of actually executing in a certain time period. You need to know what's negligible, and that's the most important part. What's negligible, because that's the stuff that you got to let go.
Yeah.
And then
it's so hard.
Yeah.
It makes
and
sense.
what am I going to
It's so simple, right? But it's so
Yeah,
hard.
it's so hard to
hold
do.
on to so much.
Sure. Yeah. And then decide.
Yeah.
And then that's the explosion. And then the expansion is show up, take your stance, habitualize it, own it, and wear it. That's who you are. That's the decision you made. Own it. Because whether that outcome from the decision you make is favorable or unfavorable, it doesn't really matter. Because if you own the choice, then the choice is never going to own you, or the outcome's never going to own you. And if the outcome doesn't own you, then it doesn't decide how you react or respond to that outcome. It allows you to take in the outcome as data, favorable or unfavorable, and then use that to iterate and make another change. And time is obviously the thing that everyone worries about. Oh, we don't have enough time. But I mean, really, nobody has enough time. Like, nobody has a year, nobody has a day, nobody even has an hour. We all have one heartbeat, because your entire life can change in one heartbeat. And I'm going to prove that later.
Yeah.
One heartbeat is all it takes. Yes. So that's it. That's the time that you got to work with. So if we're all working really with the same amount of time, the time isn't really the problem, or it's not even a challenge. It's nothing. It doesn't exist in the equation. It's what can be accomplished, and then what is the way that I can actually get it done, the time period that I assume that I can get it done in quickly enough, or sorry, not quickly enough, but efficiently enough to actually make it something that is actionable and I'm doing useful work.
So I want to talk about this name, sovereign leadership. I love it.
Oh, sure.
Tell me more about how you came up with that and what does it mean to you?
Sure. That's fair.
And what
Yeah.
do you want people to know about what it means?
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So, when I had for 11 years, I had a tech implementation firm. We did a lot of system integrations, software builds. Worked with a lot of organizations from 1 million to 300 million was kind of the range that we really worked with. And during that time, I was under a lot of high pressure situations, a lot like a lot of the individuals that are listening now. Just a few months ago, I actually shut that company down because I wanted to step into this new work. Because I was noticing with a lot of the leadership in the organizations we were working with, they were just struggling with a lot of things that we're actually talking about. And over the years, I've developed a lot of these frameworks and these ways of addressing these situations that have helped me to grow that organization and deal with a lot of the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, and addressing various different challenges in the business, and with the things that I can control. So that's kind of where I decided, you know what, I want to work with people now. I want to work with these people. That's really where I feel like I was being called. So that's what I did. And the way I came up with the name, actually, I had all these different thought processes and stuff. And I had integrated ownership, which is the thought process of taking ownership and integrating it into your life. But actually, I was in Spain recently with my family, and we were on a bus doing a tour, and the thought process of sovereignty just kind of got mentioned through like what we were dealing with the tour guide.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about it. I was like, that sounds very, there's just something about it that just caught my attention. So I started kind of doing some thought process on it. And really what servant leadership, or sorry, it's not servant leadership. Servant leadership is the, doing for.
Yeah.
But sovereign leadership is knowing and trusting the self to do for. So when it comes to it's almost a form of powerful servant leadership, because you're still doing for, regardless of whether you're in service to yourself or serving to others. You're still doing for, but you're doing it with this grounded foundation of who you are and being unapologetically you, because that's ultimately what we're here to do, right? I mean, we're all here to learn something. I mean, there's a purpose in the life that we live, and there's a purpose that we want to we all have something we want to put out into the world, whether it's just into a local small unit of our family or direct relationships, or if it's in a much bigger playground where there's something that we want to give. And it's hard to give that if who we are keeps changing with environment and circumstance. And so having that core allows for I this really kind of stemmed from belief. I believe that your beliefs are an effect of your truth. And truth is a subjective thought process of what you believe and what aligns with you based on objective reality of what's actually happening. And those beliefs that you're going to have, which are going to form your opinions, which are downstream from your beliefs, and then the way that you act, are going to be traced all the way back to that core. So if that core is always shifting, then those beliefs are always going to shift, and then your opinions are always going to shift, and then the way you act is always going to shift. So by being able to find stability in that deep core of who you are, that's sovereignty. That's what it means to me. And that's why I chose sovereign leadership, because you have to be this unwavering piece inside, so that everything on the outside, which obviously is going to change in delivery, doesn't change in the core belief structure, because all of those beliefs are coming from this core truth of who you are.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your story, right? Your own leadership journey, because you went through a stretch where everything hit at once.
Sure.
And how did that reshape your view of sovereignty, and what it means to lead when everything feels unstable?
Sure. That's okay.
Okay,
So
ready
it's
to go there yet?
yeah, no, it's fine. We can go there for sure. August 2021. My daughter is born. My 4-year-old is born, and my other daughters were 15 at the time. And then in late 2022, so about November, December, 15 months or so later, my company lost about $60,000 worth of monthly revenue due to
Ouch.
various,
Yeah.
yeah. uh, so uh, between that time, between those times, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with 3 distinct cancers. My brother-in-law was diagnosed with um, was it colon cancer. My wife was diagnosed with a rare skin cancer, and then and that was all in the scope of 2022.
Wow.
Or
Yeah.
sorry,
Everything really did hit at once.
yeah. Then we go into 2023, and my aunt died very unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. And then in January of 2024, my cousin, her daughter, who I'm very close to, was in a very bad car accident that required her jaw to be wired shut. They just, I mean, when you look at the pictures, you can't even believe she lived through that. It was unbelievable. It was a 60,000 pound truck hit her,
Oh my God.
T-boned her. Um, so like all of these things happen in a very short window in my personal life, and all this while my daughter's trying to learn how to walk. So sleep was not very common. So there was a lot of misalignment and lack of balance in my life. So that was part of the equation. So it's 2023 now, beginning of 2023. This is before, or sorry, no, this is beginning of 2024. I'm getting my timelines mixed up. So all of these things that already happened. We had just gone through, and 2023 was a tough year. We didn't really grow. Obviously, we shrank because we lost so much revenue, but we maintained. I had to cut
Hmm.
60% of my staff, and we held on.
Yeah. You
And
survived.
yeah, we survived, but I'm trying to run $1 million operation with half the revenue, right? So
Mhm.
it's like it's hard. Um, it's February, early February of 2024, and I am currently in Florida because I've been traveling back and forth to be with some family down there. Um, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table with my cousin who just had her jaw unwired, and we're going over a diet plan for her to get her strength back. And I get a call from my COO at the time. This guy had been with me for 3 years, and he'd been through it with me through the ups and downs, and very dedicated. We're going to rebuild this. Was the communication that he had been having with me, and so I answered the phone, and he said that our lead developer, which was actually our only developer at the time, had a family emergency, and he had to fly out to Holland for at least a week. It's like, okay, no problem. But we were just launching another project. Um, so I asked him to talk about the project, and he's like, well, before I do that, I need to let you know that I took an offer from one of our clients,
Oh,
and you have
yeah.
me for 4 more weeks. It's like, okay. So I said, all right, obviously I need to know, what's going on. So then I find out, we start talking about this project that we just, we're currently at 2 active projects that were going on. We had this new one that was just kicking off, and then we were doing a discovery. We're in mid discovery for a 6-figure project with a nice organization. And so I open up he told me that we were going to do it in 6 weeks, that he had, all 3 sprints planned. So I open up Jira, and and I'm looking at the scope of all this stuff. I'm like, dude, there's no way this is only going to take 6 weeks. Like, there's no way this is 3 sprints. This is like a 24-week project easily. Right. And I'm like, didn't you push back on these timelines? And he didn't. He's just like, oh, well, this is what they said they wanted. And I'm like, that's not your job. Like,
Right.
so obviously, like you're leaving, my developer's gone. You just, you left me in this situation. I've got all this stuff going on in my life, and now I've got nobody to work on this stuff with all these active projects. And now I've got the scope issue on the new project that we've already like signed a contract on. So, yeah. So I got off the phone with him, and I'm sitting there looking at my cousin who, is just like learning how to eat again, kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I realized that the first thing that I wanted to feel was betrayed, but I wasn't. The betrayal wasn't the thing. The real problem that I
It would
realized is
be
that
easy to go there, though.
very easy.
Yeah.
But I abdicated. That was the reason why this all happened. And
Mhm.
you could give every valid reason to do so, but that's why I say delegation minus accountability is abdication,
Yeah.
because not checking in, not I can't. You can't just all of a sudden turn trust into a strategy, right? Because then hope is not a strategy.
Right.
So why would trust be? Um, so accountability is so important, and I lost that in the noise of everything going on in my life.
Yeah.
So obviously, I didn't. There's a lot of opportunity to spiral, but instead, I just activated my protocol. I did the stop. That's why stop. Stop apologizing, stop twisting, stop outsourcing, right? Stop performing, stop pretending that things aren't
Yeah.
real. Um, and that's where that came from. Because you know, uh, really it was the sorting, right? So once you stop and say, okay, like let's get rid of that noise. Now the sorting, what's mine to carry here? Well, obviously I can't control the fact that he's leaving. I can't control the things going on in my life, the cancers, the car accident, any of those things, right? Those things were negligible in the time because there was nothing I could do about them. They weren't mine to carry. At this moment, my responsibility was with the company and figuring out how to save the account, how to fix everything. Because if I got lost in all of this, then the company dies.
Right.
So that was my sorting process, was sorting through what needs to be done now. Okay, so we need to fix this timeline. We need to fix this agreement. We need to ensure that the other clients are good to go during this time period that the developer is gone. And I need a new project manager
Yeah.
because I'm losing mine. So that was the stand that I took. I'm saying, okay, so what's the scope? What are the terms? What's the alignment? With what's going on. What are the negligibles? Obviously, negligibles were the way I felt, the way that I thought this looked when I had to go to the client and renegotiate the timeline. It didn't really matter what it looked like. It just needed to be done.
Yeah.
So that's where the power in stop, sort, and stand come in, because they remove the things that don't really belong. They help you filter out the noise and only
Yeah.
go with what actually matters. And then, so with that decision, I called a few contacts that I knew, and I found one, actually the one that I really wanted was available. So she came on as a contractor, and she was available quickly. So she came on that day, and we started reviewing what was going on. I called the client and I told them within 48 hours, I told them what happened. Like, this scope is incorrect. There's no way that this is accomplishable. This is what we're looking at. We will have a plan within 48 hours. And I'm going to sit down and lay that out with you so you understand what it's going to look like. Um, and they were agreeable. I mean, I don't want to say they were excited about it, but they were agreeable and they
Yeah.
understood. So then I sat down with that project manager, and over the next 48 hours, we did do that and we delivered. But in that time window, I was also not only in Sarasota, Florida at the time for my cousin, I also had a in-person discovery meeting with that large client the next day, and that project, the guy, the COO, was scheduled to be there as well, and I needed him to show up, because if he didn't, then there would be a big sign that something was going on. So I had to
Mhm.
sit through the next day an 8-hour session sitting across from this guy. And that was not easy. But at the end of the day, I had already made my stand. I already knew what was mine to carry. I already knew what I was
Yeah.
going to do, how I was going to execute. I knew that I needed him to finish this discovery. I kicked him out of every other project. And I knew that if he could finish that in the next 3 weeks, I could let him go. And that's exactly how it happened. I let him go 3 weeks later. And I would be in full control of what was going on. Even though it wasn't the most favorable way of the outcome occurring, I still owned it. I owned the
Yeah.
choices that I made beforehand, and understood that they were mine. They were my decisions. So the weight of what needed to be carried was mine. So, but I needed to sort through that so I didn't carry unnecessary weight. So I always say that, um, when you go through this process, what I believe it does is it gives you the trust in the people below you, or your team, to
Mhm.
delegate to them and trust that they can execute. But then it also gives you the trust in yourself to push your authority back upstream,
Mhm.
and to push those responsibilities that don't belong on you back upstream. And that's really where the significant shift is finding and that all requires you to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what I was able to do, um, through a lot of these different various scenarios that I found myself in, was learn how to trust myself in all of those moments. And that framework definitely helped me, in that season. And it still helps me today. And I use it all the time. It's just very automatic now. So it's not as rehearsed in my mind. It's just automatic. So yeah, that was
Yeah,
kind
this is
of,
great.
we saved that. Yeah, we saved that client, by the way. So some outcomes
Mhm.
here. We saved the client. We closed the discovery. We closed that. I ended up, that client that we saved with the bad scope, they were with us until I shut down. I offloaded them to another vendor when I ended up shutting down the company.
Mhm.
Then I rebuilt the team. We brought on several new projects. Things went well, but when I knew that I was no longer, that my calling was no longer in implementation, and it was
Yeah.
now in leadership. That was when I had to make the decision to shut down. And my company, unfortunately, it wasn't really sellable. It was just one of those things where it was like, I was kind of the company.
Yeah.
So if I was going away, it needed to. So
Yeah.
it was a letting go process. It was another time where the framework came into play, where I had to stop, and what is this going to look like, and what do we stop twisting the story, and sort through what was mine to carry, and what I knew I needed to do. I made the decision, and then I showed up, and that's what I'm doing here right now.
So what did that season teach you about who you are as a leader?
I would say that as a leader, I'm an individual that's unwavering in what I believe. I understand how to read a situation. Um, I would say that if I was going to put it into terms, I would say that I consider myself responsive instead of reactive.
Mhm.
And reactive is when something happens, being able to go through a process to understand what it actually means, and where you should take your stand in whatever that occurrence is.
Yeah.
Just kind of like in that scenario.
Yeah, there's so
Um,
much intentionality with that.
yes.
Yeah.
And I am measured. I'm analytical when I need to be. I like to understand the data before I make a decision. And I consider myself patient, but my wife doesn't. No, but it's just, there's always, there's no such thing as perfection, right? I mean, you're
Right.
always being challenged in your life, and I mean, if you're not being challenged, then there's kind of just no point in being here anymore. So, I am always looking forward to the challenge. Now, you know, um, I still have my misgivings, I would say. There's contextual
We all do.
environments that I still find myself uncomfortable in, and
Yeah.
um, but I believe that comfort. I believe that comfort happens in loops. It doesn't necessarily happen in zones.
Mhm.
When you get caught in these loops of comfort where things are uncomfortable, so you start chasing things that are comfortable. And
Mhm.
then, when they don't fulfill, that emptiness that you're feeling that made you chase them in the first place, you continue to chase more and more comfort until you get lost in that loop. And that becomes that hamster wheel that we all find ourselves on.
Yeah.
So that's why I try to find myself in as much discomfort as I possibly can, because I know that if something feels uncomfortable, then it's probably the right path that I should be walking.
That's the growth, right? So you're building this whole, or you've been building this whole body of work for tech leaders. And like I said, we're talking to them day in and day out. We're hearing what they're experiencing, and right now they're stretched thin. I saw a stat recently that almost half of IT leaders don't have a trusted thought partner inside the organization at all.
Sure.
Which was, I mean, that's concerning given, the pressure and the pace, and what's being expected of them right now.
Hmm.
And isolation is one of those big predictors of leadership burnout too, right? So no wonder the burnout numbers are rising. So for the IT leader who is feeling really stretched and overwhelmed, what does the path look like? Like, what's the first step that you would want them to take?
Sure. Well, obviously having a sounding board, somebody who understands, the terrain that you
Yeah.
walk,
Yeah.
you know, that's very helpful. I think that uh, there is there's an element of understanding who you are that, being a leader is the loneliest place you could ever be.
Yeah.
I always say that about being a founder, right? Like
Yep.
it's so lonely. You could be in a room surrounded by people and feel completely alone.
Yeah.
And even other founders, part of masterminds, but you still, there's always that element. And, but that loneliness, I think, is more intimidating than it needs to be because, I call it stepping into the void, and because so many of us have these like these lonely feelings inside that we're afraid of, so we try to fill them with other things, so that we don't have to face them.
Yeah.
And all the while, the thing that's actually making us not rise to the place that we want to go, or preventing us from crossing over that path and getting to where we want to go, is the object that we use to fill the void. The only way, through it is by stepping into that void. There's this interesting anomaly that happens in nature, where if you see a herd of cows and they're grazing a field and a storm it rises and comes toward them, they run away from the storm. And but a storm will actually move faster than a cow will move.
Right.
So it actually, if it's moving toward them, they're going to get caught in it anyway. But because they're running away from it, the cow always gets lost in the storm. Now a buffalo is very different than a cow. When a buffalo sees a storm coming, they turn and walk straight into it. And it's an interesting thought process because the fastest way to get past a storm is through it.
Yeah.
So
So we want to be
I
the
kind of look at
buffalo.
that. Exactly. Yeah. And it's what I call the discomfort shift rather than that comfort loop, which is what your
Mhm.
cow gets caught in.
Yeah.
Um, so by taking this shift and walking into those things that are uncomfortable, and those could be anything. I mean, those could be waking up at 5 a.m. to go to a 6 a.m. hot yoga class, which I do. And it could be, that's very uncomfortable at
Yeah.
6 a.m. uh, it's just, going and, doing that thing that you have always wanted to do, but you always had a little bit of fear to do.
Mhm.
There's just always something out there, as small and minute as it could be. Everything is what I was saying before. It stacks, the negatives stack, and so do the positives. So
Yeah.
over time, there's repetitions, and that's why when I talk about showing, I talk about habitualize. Do the reps, do the reps. Just keep showing up. I mean, it's the same thing in pretty much everything, like in leadership and parenting. I mean, showing up is the most important thing that you can do for a child as a parent. Just being there for them, being a support system. And that's the most important thing you can do for yourself as well. So you just have to take all those things that you do externally and bring them internally, because if again, you can't build that 3-story house on that 1-story foundation. And if you're a 1-story foundation and you want to build a 3-story house, you're going to struggle. And you're going to fall apart more often than you'd like. But just remember, don't resist that collapse. Always take the opportunity to collapse, because when you do, it allows you to rebuild that foundation
Yeah.
and to grow from there, and to step into something new, step into something that's worth moving forward into.
Yeah. So walk me through what it is like to work with you. No, you've
Sure.
got this framework. You've set up sovereign leadership.
Mm,
I think we talked a little bit about the authority reset protocol. Can
mm.
you walk me through what it would look like for a tech leader to work with you?
Sure. Yeah. So currently, I'm doing the container in which I offer my services is something I call the foundry. This is what I call where sovereign leaders are forged. It's a currently it's a one-on-one 6 month engagement where I become like a sounding board.
Mhm.
Number one, we work on various different frameworks. The whole idea is to, you're already a leader. You're already somebody who is out there facing the noise every day. But the way that the world is moving right now, or especially in technology, there's a demand for you to evolve faster than natural evolution can happen.
Mhm.
So what I say is we have to update your operating system, how you operate, the model in which you use to operate. It doesn't need to change; it just needs an update. It needs more data. It needs more classes and
Mhm.
and controllers and more tools in the toolbox. Um, you also need a sounding board. You need a sparring partner, somebody who can work with you
Yeah.
and help you. You already have a ring that you exist in every day. Because you're already out there. Getting in the ring with your superiors. Your board members, your team, right? So, but having the I say black belts are built in the dojo. They're not built in the ring, right?
Right.
You got to have that training and do the reps. So that's what it kind of looks like. It's a 6 month engagement where we speak, we kind of get an assessment of where you're at right now, what's going on, and then I kind of make an assessment, what I think is the best places to focus. And then we deal with those things, and we incorporate frameworks and thought processes, the things that I have established already, and we see how they apply to your life. Because I use this Bruce Lee quote a lot because it's something that I live by. It's absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and make it uniquely your own. And that's exactly what I do with people. Like, I don't tell you, oh, this is a system, just install it and you're going to be good. We help you build your own system, something that's yours, that you own. Now, it uses language that I'm going to help introduce you to, but ultimately, if you're ready to level up and you're not finding that anything out there that's helping you do that, this will.
I love that. Absorb what's useful, discard what's not, and make it your own. And I think that's the part leaders forget because we don't have to take in every opinion, right? I think
Mm,
we tend to, but we don't have to. We can pause. We could decide for ourselves what fits for us, and
sure.
that's sovereignty.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
So, if you could leave IT leaders with one message, it's a new year. We're leaving
Mm,
2025 behind. We're going into 2026 and
sure.
all of its chaos. What's one
Okay.
message you want to leave with IT leaders?
Sure. Understand currency.
Mm.
That's
Yeah, talk about
I
that.
think it's a big one. Yeah. So you know, um, currency is a very important thing to understand because money, for example, is a currency, but it is the least important currency that we have. Your
Mhm.
attention is a currency. Your relationships are currency. Your energy, anything that's an energetic exchange between others, is a
Mhm.
currency. So uh, when you're exchanging currency with other people, right? For example, somebody comes to you with panic situation, or oh, we have to get this implemented now because we're running out of time, right? Basically, what they're doing is they're creating a transaction with you. They're paying you in panic, and they want you to
Mhm.
pay them back in action, right?
Right.
Like, that's a currency exchange. So if you can understand a currency exchange, and that's just simply what that is, then you could say, all right, well, this again goes to absorb, discard, and own. So and this also fits within the other frameworks that I have. Like absorbing what is necessary, saying, okay, well, obviously this guy's panicked. He obviously wants an outcome. or this person is out panicked. Let's just say, for example, they found a competitor is doing something with AI. We'll just use that as an example, and they want to get this implemented now. Well, what's yours to absorb is, obviously there's a tool, there's something that's being implemented that's useful to the marketplace that you could implement. That's it though. Like, somebody telling you that it needs to be done now, that's an authority play. That's not useful. You can discard that. You're getting the signal out from the noise, right, in this regard. So that's what absorbing what is necessary or what is useful. So now you can take that information and you can say, all right, well, obviously if there's a tool out there, I can go and investigate it. And now that I've discarded what doesn't matter, the timelines and all that, the panic, the emotional gift of panic and anger and frustration that was given to me, they're not mine. I'm not going to deposit that into my bank account and become frustrated as well. That's a choice. You don't have to take that energy from them. And then from there, you can say, all right, let's go investigate. Let's use objective reality to see what this is really about. You might decide that tool or that method isn't going to work for your organization, its structure, or what your offering is, or depending on the context of what that panic was about. And if that's the case, then you can use that information though to maybe find something different that actually does move the needle, because every rabbit hole you go down when you're looking at objective reality will open up a path to something else. So now all of a sudden you might have the opportunity to find something better, or you might have the opportunity to not waste your company's time on something that is not effective for its direction. So by not and that's what I call owning it, right? Like that's really the alchemy, right? Because you're taking ownership of that now. You're taking that signal out of the noise, and then you're owning the outcome in which is coming from it. And then you can then present that in the way that makes sense because it's free of all of the currency exchange of the panic and the frustration that was given to you. So understanding currency, I think, is very important, and putting it to the forefront of your mind of, every interaction that you have with another individual is ultimately a currency exchange. And being able to ground that into your life will help you to, I would say, like we talk about awareness, right? Awareness is a kind of an abstract or really ambiguous, I should say, more thought process. But really what you need is what I call receptive vigilance, where you're being receptive and you're just being vigilant to the signals within what you're receiving. And that allows you to, if you understand that currency exchange, then it allows you to kind of take that step back and be receptively vigilant and then act on. I
love that perspective. And that applies to all leaders, not just tech leaders. Like that applies.
Sure.
I find so much value in that with, before we were recording, I was telling you the week that I had.
Sure.
So I love that framing. Dave, thank you so much for this conversation. I think you just have this way of naming what tech leaders or leaders in general feel, but don't say out loud. The pressure, the noise, the pace. And then, I think we all have logic, but it just feels like the old logic or the logic alone isn't enough anymore. So the frameworks are so helpful. And if you're listening and you want to go deeper into this idea of sovereign leadership, how to upgrade your internal operating system, how to communicate better under pressure and actually shape the decisions around you, you can go to technologymatch.com and find Dave's page there. In addition to offering fractional CTO services in this style of leadership, he also has a program called The Foundry, which he talked about. We'll link everything in the show notes. You could type any of these keywords in and Dave will pop up in the results. But if you want the direct sovereign leadership resources he's built, you can find that at sovlead.com, SOVLEAD.com. Anywhere else people can connect with you, Dave?
Well, no, the website's the best place. There's an application on there for, I only work with a few leaders at a time currently as we continue to develop, this is very new and exciting, but very effective with the leaders that I have been interacting with currently. But I only work with a few at a time because I want to make sure that the people that I'm working with get the quality and attention that they deserve. And as I continue to scale this.
Yeah, it's fair. Well, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Tonya.